Someone's killing the Seekers. Up until now, I've been focused on protecting the gifted, potential tiles. But now there's something else. And I think it might be more dangerous than anything I've dealt with so far. To any gifted people out there, I need your help. The Splinter has a harvester. I need your help finding it before it kills us all. This is Spines. The first one was a researcher supervising a group of apprentices. He'd worked with Miranda in the past, so she got the call when his body was found. He died while at his day job at an infectious disease research center. One of his apprentices got a look at the body before the cops shut down the crime scene, and they knew it wasn't a natural death. So they called Miranda, and she sent me and Shan. It wasn't easy getting in there. Local cops and feds and reporters were swarming everywhere. I could have teleported in, but there were people in the room with the body, and slowing time would only hide me so long. After we'd been watching the building a while, I turned to Shan. Any tricks up your sleeve that'll help us out here? They smiled. Let me see what I can do. They held up their hand, and a deep blue flower bloomed out of their palm. They waited until a cop passed by close to us, and then they opened the flower. Little flecks of iridescent pollen blew away and landed on the cop's hair. Shan's eyes rolled back in their head. It's working, they said. I can see through his eyes. He's going into the lobby, up the stairs, down a hall. Now he's going past the yellow tape. Oh, dear God. And I watched Shan's beautiful face go still and terrified. They touched my forehead, and I saw what had shaken them so much, as though it was through my own eyes. A body lay face down on the floor of a lab. Gleaming white walls and lab equipment everywhere. Everything clean and bright, except for the pool of blood surrounding the body. The blood came from a wound in the man's head. But this wasn't any ordinary head wound. Not the way a body looks when it's been shot or stabbed or bludgeoned. This was like if a seam ran up the middle of a human head from the back of the neck. Imagine if you could just unzip that seam. Create a slit running from the base of the skull all the way up and over to the forehead. Imagine you could crack that slit wide open to reveal what lay inside. And imagine that nothing at all lay inside. Just a hollow, blood-stained skull cavity. Where's the brain? I asked, and Shan couldn't answer. They watched through the cop's eyes for a while, but the brain wasn't at the crime scene. It was just gone. We stuck around and watched for a while, but it was pretty clear we weren't going to get any answers, so we left. But we could both feel, somehow, that this wasn't an isolated incident. There were others coming. The moment I told Miranda about the body, she went pale. "You're sure?" she asked. "You're sure the brain was missing?" I told her I was positive. No gray matter left at the scene. Then she took a deep breath and told us what we were dealing with. A harvester. The Seekers have encountered harvesters before. It's an unusual way for gifts to manifest. Usually gifts aren't physically apparent. Usually gifted folks can be discreet. And most gifts manifest in childhood or puberty, like every other shitty quality people have to cope with. Not harvesters. Harvesters don't show any signs of unusual abilities until they suddenly activate overnight. It can happen at any age, cradle to grave. When it happens, though, it happens fast. The harvester starts to hear other people's thoughts, and those thoughts make them hungry. Their body starts to change at the same time, jaws lengthening, sight failing, ears flattening against the skull. Their appetite grows, but regular food doesn't satisfy them. They get temperamental. Sooner or later, their control slips. They crack open someone's head, scoop out the brain, and consume everything that made that person who they were. But they aren't just eating physical tissue when they do that. They're eating thoughts, memories, knowledge, a personality. And while harvesters are too much of an animal to do anything with that knowledge, they can still speak. And the right master, the right person controlling them, can ask all the right questions. They can use that knowledge. And all of that meant that we now had somebody out there who had intimate inside knowledge of the Seekers, straight from the source. Even worse, Miranda's guess was that because the person who had been killed was low on the totem pole, they'd want somebody else. They'd want another source. So we waited for the next killing. I spent my time walking around the neighborhood near the first crime scene, compelling everybody to tell me if they'd seen anything useful. None had. Shan spent that time staring into dishes of ink, pots of boiling water on the stove, the steam above a tea kettle. They were looking into the future, or trying to. We knew it wouldn't do any good. Shan can only peer into the futures of people they know, or people they have a very good description of. And only for specific actions, limited causal chains. I still don't really understand it, but bottom line, Shan can't just peer into the future and find out who's going to be murdered before it happens. They still tried, though. I'd come home at the end of the day to find them sitting at the kitchen table, looking wilted and tired, Akira sitting on one of their feet. Akira likes Shan. The second killing came a week after the first one. Winry called me, her voice high and shaky. "It happened again, Ren," she said. "I'm looking at it through a security camera feed right now, and oh god, it's awful." It was the same as before. Skull split open, missing brain. Except this time the killing had been near a basketball court in the dead of night. This time, the cops could only do so much to keep people away after the body had been carted away. We waited for things to die down. Then I compelled the one remaining beat cop to take a walk. We found the spot where the Seeker had died, a congealed pool of tacky blood on the concrete. Shan ran their fingertips along the chalk outline of the body, the dirt and broken glass along the edge of the basketball court, everything in sight. Finally, they shuddered and flinched. That was deeply unpleasant," they said. I asked them to show me. They tried to change my mind, tried to just describe the scene to me, but that's not how I work. I need to know, no matter how bad, even if I'll regret it later. After a while, Shan agreed and rubbed some blue pollen on my eyelids. It probably looked really tacky, like fluorescent eyeshadow, but at the moment I didn't really care, because I saw the harvester. It was on a leash strapped to a complicated leather harness. It had been human once. Not anymore, though. Its jaws were too big, toothy and protruding from its face. Its eyes had shriveled and sunk into its wormy white flesh, like they'd been unused for so long they'd just atrophied. It was a strange way of seeing, the pictures Shan picks up from their surroundings. They were layered, like I was seeing from different angles and perspectives at the same time. Things were blurred and confusing and too busy. Still, I saw the harvester. I saw it lunge out of the bushes as its victim jogged by, a middle-aged man in a tracksuit. I saw it crack open the man's skull and devour what lay within with its oversized jaws. I saw a figure holding its leash. I couldn't tell anything about the person at first. They wore a ski mask and a baggy sweatshirt. I'd never be able to pick that person out of a crowd, I thought. But then the harvester surged forward in a particularly excited motion and dragged its master with it. And that motion pulled the handler's sleeve up, exposing a delicate feminine wrist, pale as milk, pale and tattooed with a trailing violet shape, a jellyfish. Shan and I went back to the burrow without another word. I think they felt guilty about showing me something so terrible, even though I asked them to. I tried not to let it get to me, but that big-jawed thing, unzipping that person's head, I hope none of you listening ever have to see it for yourself. No one deserves to carry that image around with them. As soon as we got back to the burrow, we went down into Winry's computer lair. Miranda was there. She and Winry bent over lines of code on a screen. "Hey, Winry," I said, "when you get a chance, can you reach out to as many tattoo parlors as you can find? We're looking for someone who has done a jellyfish tattoo on the inside of a woman's wrist." Miranda froze. It was like someone had knocked the wind out of her. "What did you say?" she whispered. I told her the person controlling the harvester was a woman. A pale woman with a jellyfish tattoo on her wrist. After I explained it, Miranda just said one word, a name. Iris. Then she cried. She cried, and she said she was sorry, and then she explained to us why the harvester was all her fault. Things you should know about the Seekers. Miranda was raised to be a Seeker. Parents, her parents' parents, all her ancestors going back to that sacred grove in Greece. So she grew up hearing about the grove, the mosaic, and the trumpet. But, like most adolescents, she went through a rebellious phase. She read the books in the locked cases in the library, heard whispers about shortcuts to the mosaic. She studied the abilities of those who would be needed for that shortcut. The blood magic some claimed would make the awakening happen in her lifetime. Miranda left the Seekers for a time, in her 20s, and she traveled the world and learned these magics. She came to her senses, eventually. She saw the insanity of the faction who would become the Splinter, and she rejoined the Seekers. She even brought her husband back with her young husband who had traveled and learned by her side. And Miranda rose through the ranks, as did her husband, and for a time they were happy. They had a daughter, and everyone assumed she would grow up to be Miranda's successor. That is, until Miranda's husband became dissatisfied with the pace of their progress and tried to get her to leave again. And when she refused, he fled and founded the Splinter. And so Miranda lost her husband and gained a nemesis, her handsome, clever Elliot, my Skull Man. But that wasn't all she lost. There was their daughter, Iris, caught between mother and father, between Seeker and Splinter. Iris went with Elliot, but she kept in touch with Miranda when she could. Staticky calls from burner phones, emails from a new address each time. Miranda mourned their loss, but she found comfort in the idea that Iris was with her father, that she might bring him back to his senses. Then came the text from Elliot. A photo of Iris, mangled and bloody and clearly dead. 4 words, "This is your fault." Who knows how they faked the photo, or if they even faked it. Maybe they just found someone with a gift that could undo such damage. I've seen more impossible things than that. Hell, I see them every day. The important thing here is that they were thinking ahead, making it look as though Iris was off the board, getting her ready to take Elliot's place. Neither Shan nor I knew what to say to Miranda after she finished her story. Part of me felt like I should be angry. She'd recruited me, gotten me on her side, sent me out on missions, and she'd done it without giving me all the facts. So that sucked on her part. But she seemed so miserable, so broken by this new knowledge about Iris, that it was hard to hold it against her. We were still standing there, trying to process this information, when Winry sat up and started clicking away at something on her computer. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "I know this is a bad time, but I think we have another one." Like with the last one, she was able to get into the surveillance cameras on the scene. It was a pharmaceutical company, another day job site, another poor seeker working late, not knowing that a harvester was coming for them, another corpse with a cracked open skull. But this time, there was one big difference. Whoever had been there must have known the angle of the security cameras, because they'd used the blood to scrawl a message on one of the walls, right where we could see it. It said, "Send Ren, or we'll take a seeker every day. 48 hours, the dead city." Shit. Looks like I'm going home. Spines is a production of Zoom Doom Stories. It's narrated by Ren Jones, written by Jamie Killen, website and logos by Benjamin Pond, produced by Jamie Killen and Benjamin Pond. You can support Spines by visiting patreon.com/Spines Podcast and by subscribing and leaving a review on iTunes. Spines is a member of Fate Crafters Studios. Find more great shows at fatecrafters.net. This week we recommend Drift and Ramble Podcast, a look into the histories and mysteries of the Old West, presented in a format that's part storytelling and part audio drama, as the characters come to life to tell the story from their own perspectives. These are true stories and American legends. There are profiles of lawmen, bandits, saloon girls, and Native Americans, and their triumphs and treasures awaiting your discovery. It's a little bit history, a little bit humor, and a whole lot of fun.